let everybody know that today is National Puppy Day. You know, news you can use. Let the record show that all the councilor members are here today, and you have in front of you the minutes from the March 9th meeting, and do they meet with your okie dokie?
I would move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion second by Councilor Takis. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? I hear nobody, so motion carries. Is there any visitor comment? I'm looking. Nope, there is no visitor comment. Moving forward then, reports. As you can see in your agenda, we did have an audit report scheduled. There was an unfortunate traffic accident, as I understand, that the folks were not able to join us, and so that's moved to a forward date. So I just wanted everybody to know that. Under a mayor report in the council packet, you have one of the things I get to do is make good neighbor awards for people who have done good things in our community. And I just wanted to let you see I made a good neighbor award to Dave Martin. He is a wonderful man, lives out with Lois out at the air park. You can see the wonderful things that he has done for the community, and I know there are many other things that he's been part of in our community. He's a wonderful kind of guy, and as the last line say, Dave Martin is the definition of a good neighbor, and I had the pleasure of actually presenting him a nice certificate on behalf of the City of Independence and thanking him for many years of service and optimism, encouragement on so many fronts with so many folks. So please know that I acted in our collective name to recognize a wonderful neighbor in our community. Other reports I'd like to give to you. As many of you know, I'm on the board of the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. I've done that for a number of years. And at our recent annual awards banquet, our former city manager here in Independence, David Klein, received the West Kavarston Award for professional service for 40 years and serving 5 cities in Oregon as a city manager. And after he left us and retired, he also went on and did some interim work in Fall City. He's even doing interim work as we speak today up in Gresham. So that was a wonderful opportunity. The city of Newburgh made the nomination, and they asked me to help make the award along with Mayor Rogers out of Newburgh. And so that was really a fun thing to do. I've also been appointed to the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments Legislative Committee to help keep track and represent, along with their lobbyist, the issues related to the 43-member government, cities, counties, and special districts represented by the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. And also, a final thing, at the request of the League of Oregon Cities, I submitted testimony with great help from Tom Pessimir on House Bill 3040, which as drafted, would change how SDCs are collected in the state of Oregon. It's a bad bill. It's bad for independence. It's bad for Oregon cities, and the League of Oregon Cities has helped bring a number of people together to help the legislature understand. Many of them do not understand how cities are financed, how development is financed, where the monies come from. And so we're working very, very hard on trying to defeat that bill. It's one of the most important ones that the league is working on. So we'll keep you appraised of how that's going, but I did want you to know that that was taking place. With that,
Mr. Mayor, the bill number again? I didn't catch it.
House Bill 3040 with the -1 amendments. And yeah, we'll be meeting with, we've already met with legislative staff on these, and they know where we are, and they're in agreement with us. They don't understand how some legislators think. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pessimir for his city manager report.
So thank you, Mayor. I don't have a lot for tonight, just some updates. We are still waiting for guidance from the Treasury Department in regards to the American Rescue Plan. I think you know that some of this money is going to get pushed down directly to the local government level, and they're promising some flexible rules so we can get those monies to the people that need it and the areas that need it. So we're very excited to see that information come out. Until it does, there really isn't anything we can do. My understanding is they're going to be splitting the payment up into two pieces. The first would come about 30 to 60 days after the request is put into the state, which is much of a formality, is my understanding. And the second would come a year from that. So those monies will kind of trickle in for time. I think because it's a rescue plan, it's also somewhat of a recovery plan, it sounds like. And so those monies will get spent over time. Diversity, equity, and inclusion training. We've talked about this a lot in the past, but I just wanted to let you know that that first round of training finished this Thursday. That training was put on by Western Oregon University, and they did an incredible job of putting that together. I have no idea how much time they put into and thought they put into that, but they were really looking to do something not only that was impactful to the local governments and organizations in the area, but also something that they could do in the future for other classes. So I think they're in the process of figuring out how to structure that right now. There were 8 people from Independence staff that attended that. So we definitely got a lot of great information and great training out of that. The library is now open. It's a limited reopening, and my understanding, talking to Patrick Bodley, the library manager, is it's been very active over there. So that's great news. Sounds like people are coming in, being very respectful, using the library as it should be. And so they're still looking at how that's working. But of course, as they can open up more, they will. But they have been open the entire last week and this week, and plan on staying open as long as they can. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a quick update on something. We have kind of had a little bit of separation, I guess is the best way to say it, between city uses and farm uses, especially out at the sports park. The sports park abuts directly up with some large fields that are doing agricultural use and have been doing agricultural use for a long time. It's my understanding of a long time ago, there was some sort of agreement for the city to put in some trees there to help buffer between the two uses. And so we were actually able to work with the farmer there who owns that, as well as some others. And so if you go out there today, you'll see that a bunch of Leland cypress trees have been placed out there. Those are pretty quick growing trees. And so, you know, it'll take a number of years, but those trees will go up and provide a buffer between the two uses. The city paid for the trees. They cost about $5,000. We actually had one of the people in the area who we worked with, Fremont Forest Services, donated their time, value of $2,000 to $2,500 to plant the trees. So they did that voluntarily for the city. Oh, and by the way, we got the trees from Rocky Mountain Nursery, which is a local nursery. And then the farmer, Sednecker Farms, was going to be watering the trees to make sure they survive. So good partnership there. Good to, you know, see that we can work collaboratively and get something done that probably will benefit both the city and the farmer and for the long time. Just a couple of quick grants. I try to let you know anytime we're applying for grants, but we are looking to do another transportation growth management grant that's through ODOT. It might actually be a quick response grant. They're actually both from the same funding source, and they just act a little bit differently. A letter of intent is due here soon, so just giving you a heads up. We've talked about it internally, and one of the things that jumped out in the 2040 vision plan was the Central Plaza area. So not just the plaza, but the area around it as well. There's a number of different opportunities there that are getting identified in both the transportation system plan, as well as opportunities for uses in that area, which would get some users who need to be closer to different services. So I really don't know what to say about it, because that's part of the grant, is to actually kind of study the area and figure out what makes sense there. But we've spent a lot of time looking at the downtown, Old Town area, and we feel that based on what we saw in the 2040 vision plan, we ought to at least go out there and look and see what are the possibilities in that area. So obviously we don't know if we'll be successful in that, but certainly we're going to try to do that. Our last TGM grant was actually the transportation system plan. So the ODOT has essentially been paying for all the work that we've been doing on that for the last year. And then we also are applying for Oregon State Marine Board boating facility grant. I may have mentioned this before, but basically we're looking at a grant to design paddlers access in Riverview Park. So those are both out there. So I really don't have a whole lot else, but I'm here for questions, and my staff is kind of waiting in the wings if you have questions as well.
Questions for the manager?
Yes. Any idea what's going in down at Central Plaza? I know that that's sold, and there is a crew in remodeling inside of the old Roths.
Yeah, we don't have any information on that. They certainly haven't pulled any building permits, and so I think it's just some cleanup work, is from what we've heard at this point. But
Okay. And
no-
how
no
about
information to share.
any update on Independence Station?
Yeah, well, I think Aaron Young has got his sign up there, and he continues to tell us that he is getting really close to coming in with a land use application. So we're tracking that and waiting to see that. But if that holds true, yeah, we should see something here in the very near future. So
Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay. Moving forward for liaison reports, I'm not sure if all the committees have met, but this is just an opportunity to check in. Councilor Roden, do you have anything for WINPEG?
I do. This was my first meeting with WINPEG, and we talked with Marty Wines, the city manager of Monmouth, to discuss the PEG fees, which is the Public Education and Government Channel Access Fees. And she says she is fighting with charter cable providers in order for them to pay. They have a fee right now where they get paid $1 per prescriber per month in order to get these fees. And so we voted on it that night if we wanted to have her utilize a significant amount of her time to try to fight for these fees, which she said charter would fight tooth and nail, she feels, not to pay. And so we decided that it probably, for the money that it would collect, which would be at best $2,000 a year, that it might not be the best way of doing it. But then, so we voted on it, and she's going to write the language where we can still negotiate with charter in the future to try to get those fees put in. But we thought it was more beneficial to college students and the people who use charter services to get this public education and government channel than to fight for these fees. And then we kind of got into a debate, a positive debate on equity of the situation, where MyNet pays the $1 per prescriber fee, charter won't pay it. So there's equity problems there. And I said that we should just negotiate each business individually and see where we can go, because I guess it's been a trend that smaller local internet providers and companies do pay the fees a lot better than the big companies. And it was going to cost the city of Monmouth several thousands of dollars to try to fight for this and potentially not even get it. So we decided to keep the language open, but to just go ahead and get that public service out to people who need it. for the public education channels out to people who need it. And they also told me that they have a satellite that was damaged during the ice storm, but we have insurance to cover the replacement of it. And so it shouldn't be an issue. And we're going to look at some more capital investments to continue to bring good programming out to the city of Monmouth and Independence with this channel.
Thank you, Councilor Roden. I appreciate that. And yes, the issues with charter are not alone. We are not alone. They have fought across the West. And yeah, if the league's legal people could tell all sorts of stories about this. So anyway, Councilor Morton, I think the library board, anything for us today?
Yes, I have both the library board and the museum. And
Please.
I wanted to tell you just one little extra bit of information on WMPEG, which is that it's not MyNet who pays the fees to WMPEG. It's the customers that MyNet collects the fee from. So it's that Charter is not collecting the fee because they refuse to carry the channel. So that's, I have been on the WMPEG board off and on for, I don't know, 20 years. I'm so
That is correct. I should have been more specific on that.
Well, I'm so glad that you are in that position because I think fresh eyes and ears will go a long ways.
Thank you.
Okay, on the library, Tom already announced that the library is open and hang on, I just lost my screen there. The library director said that after 364 days of closure, the library finally reopened, and the first two customers in the door were two young gentlemen who had been waiting patiently to come in and get their own library cards. So that was their very first business after opening. And the library director has been sharing videos about board makeup, board focus, and board comportment, which are all very interesting. And the library is also considering a strategic plan, or the library board is considering strategic plan updates. So that will be in their future. Can I just roll right on into the?
Please do.
Okay. The Heritage Museum is looking forward to a potential summer opening at the new location on 2nd Street. They've done a great deal of work getting ready to prepare for occupation of the new space. There was significant discussion about fundraising, and though I am an official member of neither the Museum Society or the Museum Board, I have offered all possible assistance towards fundraising efforts this year. I was able to come to them with some fundraising experience that doesn't necessarily exist across the board or society right now. So prepared to open up your pocketbooks later on. And that's all I have.
Great. Appreciate that. Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, Councilor Coeur, do you have anything for us this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been attending the Homeless Alliance meetings now for about 9 months and been somewhat discouraged because the focus of the meetings tends to be on Salem and not the outlying rural areas. The Monmouth representative and I met the Polk County Service Organization a couple weeks ago, and that meeting has kind of jump-started an effort to form a rural subcommittee of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. We have our first meeting this week, and I'm really hopeful that one of the things we might be able to accomplish is to reestablish a satellite service center here in Independence, because centralizing services in Dallas is a non-starter for a lot of homeless people. So more to come on that.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Okay.
I did have the
Please
Parks
do.
and Rec.
Oh, go ahead.
We did have a meeting. It was my first meeting for Parks and Rec. It was a small meeting. We only had 2 committee members present, and then Sean Irvine was there. We talked about the grant that Mr. Pessimir had talked about, which would be for signage, amenity signage on the river, and the paddler access, which actually is really cool. And think we're supposed to find out in June if we get the grant. But then it would be available again in 2 years. They talked about doing kayaks again down at the riverfront. They also talked about possibly having a couple of spots open for the community to be on the Parks and Rec committee. So that may be something that's coming up. And we got kind of excited and started talking about bringing more awareness to the city parks. We feel like we have a lot of really cool city parks that maybe not everybody knows about and knows what they offer. The sports complex is one. So we're kind of brainstorming ideas to really get the word out what Independence has to offer in our parks so that more people utilize those facilities. That's about it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. You know, sometimes it looks like my head's on. I'm scribbling notes because I think the things that you folks are telling us are important, and I write them down so that I can track those. We have nothing else here. What we're going to do, folks, is we're going to recess to go to a work session, and we'll have a work session for the city council. And this is just an opportunity for the city manager to provide information. This is a conversation. There are not going to be any decisions made here. This is just going to be an information discussion, presentation, and possible discussion on our capital improvement plan. After that's done, we'll reconvene, and then we'll go into executive session for the purpose of negotiating real property transaction. So without objection, we're going to go to we're going to recess to the work session, and Mr. Pessimir, I think this is yours.
So thank you, Mayor. Normally, this probably would be done by our Public Works Director, but as you know, we're advertising for that position right now. So if anybody out there is interested in being a Public Works Director, we currently have a recruitment going. So I think we'll kind of tag team this a little bit. Ken Perkins is joining us. Ken's our Public Works Supervisor. He's been here for a long time, does a great job, and knows the things that I don't know. So between the two of us, we'll give you a presentation. And just so you know, we'll go on here for a while. So I think by the end of the night, you'll be more than tired of hearing my voice. But we definitely want to make sure you have adequate information, but not too much information to kind of know what's going on with our capital improvement plan and where we're headed down the road. So it was kind of interesting preparing for this, because normally we'd all be in a room and we'd have these big, huge 11 by 17 sheets of paper before you with stacks and stacks of stuff that we would be going through. But that's not really practical when you're doing it virtually. So kind of switch things up here a little bit, and I'll kind of talk about how we're going to present it. But certainly when we actually present the final capital improvement plan, and what you're getting tonight is a draft, you'll have all the information. It'll be in the budget documents, and you'll be able to see the long term as well as the short term, and how that fits into the budget documents. But for tonight, I've kind of simplified some things. I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully this works and we'll get started. All right, here. So let me do a couple of housekeeping things. All right, can you all see that and see my mouse hopefully too? All right, good. Okay, so just kind of jumping in, this is the draft Independence Capital Improvement Plan. It is certainly not the final. There's still some work that we have to do. Particularly, we need to balance all the different funding sources out that support the projects in the capital improvement plan. And we also need to make sure that we have all of the out years figured out as well. But right now we're concentrating on fiscal year 2022, fiscal year ending 2022, which starts July 1st of 2021 and ends on June 30th of 2022. That is the budget period that we're all working on very diligently here. and you will all be hearing a lot more about here in the upcoming months as we get the budget committee together and do presentations for the budget committee, who will then make a recommendation to council for approval. So just kind of an overview of what we are doing. Oh my goodness, now I've messed something up. So hold on, let me see what I've done here. I think I started in the wrong spot, so let me go back to the beginning. There we go. So just kind of an overview of what we are talking about tonight. And just for those who may have not had a chance before, what is a capital improvement plan? It really establishes the priorities and plans for the funding of projects to improve our existing and develop new infrastructure and facilities. So these are the big capital projects that we talk about. They're almost always more than $50,000. There's something that's going to be in place for, you know, a long period of time. Usually 5 years is the minimum that you would be looking at, but usually it's 10, 20, 50, 100 years. The plan promotes efficient use of the city's limited financial resources, reduces costs, and assists in the coordination of public and private development. So what we're trying to accomplish with this plan is really take a 5-year look at all the projects that we have coming up, and making sure that we're thinking just not about this year or last year, but all the projects that we need to be doing over a 5-year period. And really that 5-year period really comes from our master plans, which are even longer. Those are usually 20-year plans, but we're trying to back into what we can accomplish in a shorter period of time. Although we do identify the longer term projects as well, just so we don't lose anything. So it is a 5-year roadmap, which identifies the major expenditures, typically beyond routine annual operating expenses, but we also include some of those as well. It serves as a long-term long-range plan, and we review and revise it annually. The priorities may change in the capital improvement plan as we have funding opportunities that come up. As you know, we chase down grants all the time. And when we have the opportunity to get a grant, we're certainly not going to turn it down because it's not on our capital improvement plan. We'll just change our capital improvement plan and put it on there and get the project done. So, or if we have a project that deteriorates more rapidly than we expected, then sometimes we'll shuffle projects around in that 5-year time frame on the capital improvement plan. The process is really the result of our ongoing infrastructure planning. We spend a lot of time and effort trying to figure out what's going on with our infrastructure. It's critically important that we understand really that entire 20-year timeline of what we need to be doing for projects for capital. And really the core of that comes from the master plans. And so we'll talk about that as we go through this, because we are currently doing 2 master plans. As you know, one is a transportation system plan, which is being funded by ODOT through the Transportation Growth Management Grant. And the other is our sanitary sewer master plan. Our sanitary sewer master plan, you really haven't seen, and that's because just during COVID, we really haven't gone out to get the public input yet, but it's definitely moving along, and we want to make sure that we get great understanding and transparency in that process. So as we are able to have more meetings and do more things, you'll definitely see us bringing that forward and making sure that you know what's going on with the sanitary sewer master plan. What you're seeing tonight is the draft CIP. We review it at city staff, which we've done, and then we present it to council, which is what we're doing tonight. And the projects that are listed out of tonight are what we're going to be working on to make sure they're in the city budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So your feedback is appreciated, but we definitely want to make sure that you know what is going on in our capital improvement plan. So just, you probably might be wondering, you know, how are capital improvement plans funded? Because that's obviously the other piece. We're not going to go into a lot of the detail of that. That will come more during the budget presentations. But there are a number of different ways that capital projects get funded. So it's not just one thing. Matter of fact, Some projects have many different components that go into them, and you'll see some of that tonight as you look at some of the projects that we're talking about. So the financial instruments that are typically used are outside funds. That's of course where we look first: grants, federal money, state money, county funds, donations, or whatever. Obviously that's where we're going to try to maximize outside sources so that we don't have to use inside resources to do that. I'll talk about those here in a second. Development fees, those are the system development charges that you hear about. But for growth related projects, system development charges are there in order to make sure that when we have development and growth going on, the developers are making sure that they're paying for the capacity increases to the systems that are there. Utility fund revenues, those are what you would see on your utility bill. Those are broken down by different fund, but those typically pay for capital improvement projects, especially those that are maintenance or related to items that have decayed over time just because of use. General fund revenue, every once in a while we will use general fund revenue, especially on parks projects and those kind of projects. If we don't have enough funds, we will sometimes go out and take debt. And if you notice, it says debt secured by a restricted revenue source. And that's one of the things about debt that we don't talk about a lot, but is really important, is because restricted revenue sources are really the only things that debt providers will take as collateral for the loan that you're going to take. So if we're going to be doing a large sewer project, let's say, and we go out debt in order to do that, which we have here recently with the state, they're not going to look at system development charges or growth related, even though the project may be entirely growth related, because it's uncertain as to how much of that revenue or when you're going to collect that revenue. So they make sure that you have enough restricted revenue sources, which is really utility fund resources that you see on your utility bill, in order to cover the debt that you're taking out. So obviously, we look at that very carefully, as well as do the people who are obligating the debt, to make sure that everything is covered and that it is there. And then general obligation debt. And this really kind of is put in order of preference. General obligation debt is something that is you only do when you really need to do it, and you do it because you have a really high need that the public understands and is going to support, because that GO bonds or general obligation debt is something that you go out to the public to take a vote on. So that is something that you use when you have a very big project and you really don't have any other good ways to fund it. So what is typically in a capital improvement plan? It's really the same thing, but it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So here's kind of what you would typically see, and I'm using kind of the parks from the last year's capital improvement plan just as an example. So if we zoom in on that, you can see that this is from the fiscal year starting or ending in 2021. So this is from last year. And you can see that it lists the different projects that are in that 5-year timeline that we're looking at. And then it breaks it out into different years. So for this fiscal year, this was what was in the capital improvement plan for this year. For next fiscal year, this is what was planned to be in the fiscal year ending in 2022, and then the out years, as you can see. So really the focus typically is on the current budget year, and that is because you know a lot more about that. You need to make sure that your budget balances. And your out years are sometimes more aspirational on, you know, the amount of money that you're going to have to do things. And I think a good example of that, and kind of why I pull this up is to show you that is if you take a look at Sunset Park final design, engineering, and actually construction. So this year we budgeted $50,000 to that. And for next fiscal year, we had estimated, 600,000 for that. That's a lot of money for the Parks Fund. We don't collect that much money in the Parks Fund year over year. Certainly don't collect $1.1 million in the Parks Fund year over year. So what happens is you either go looking for grants, which is exactly what we did. We've been trying to get grants for Sunset Park so far, haven't been successful on that. So what happens is when you get to the next year, and you'll see this when we get to the parks capital improvement plan projects, you just move that out. That just kind of moves out over the years. Kind of what we're planning on doing with Sunset Park, kind of giving away what I'm going to talk about later, is we're going to just try to do this park slowly over time. That's the way our revenues come in. If we can land a big grant or get some monies sooner than that, obviously we'll move the project up in the schedule and get it finished. But that's kind of what we're looking at. So typically what you'll see is just all the projects over the 5-year period listed. We have some source types, just that's more for our internal use to make sure we know where the different funds are coming from. So the type and then the fund. And then we tie all those numbers out to get our totals for each fiscal year. The second thing you'll see is for each one of these projects, we will then have a separate sheet which kind of details what's in the project. So where did this project come from? Well, it came from the 2015 Parks Open Space and Master Plan. So that's what the project is. It's a highly ranked project. And it talks more in detail about what we're actually trying to accomplish. And then really just gives more detailed information about the project so that we can track it over year to year. We kind of know what's happening, and there's more information for each project for those who want to dig into either a particular project, or if they just like reading capital improvement plans and want to read through every project. But we definitely want to make sure that the information is there. One, so we can be transparent, but two, so we can just keep track of it. We got a lot of projects going on, and it helps us to make sure that we're organized and making sure that we know what we're trying to accomplish over a period of time. So rather than going into each and every one of those in detail, which I think would be a bit of a challenge, especially if we're talking about projects in out years, I figured it would be a little bit easier to basically just look at the next fiscal year. So what you're going to see tonight are just the fiscal year ending 2022 projects that are drafted and that we're putting in our budget. There's a couple reasons for that. One is to simplify the presentation, and the other is because we're getting a new transportation system plan and a new sewer master plan. Those projects over the next 5 and 20 years are going to be changing significantly as we get more information through the master plans about how they, what we need to accomplish. And typically you do your master plans every 10 years. You can do them shorter than that, but if you get longer than 10 years, then typically you're kind of starting to guess at what your capital improvement projects are going to be. And that's not good. And it's also not good because corollary to doing your master plan, and right after you do your master plan, is you do your SDC methodology and fee study, which basically lets you know how you're actually going to pay for the projects that were identified. And so those go hand in hand and lead into the capital improvement plan. And we'll be talking about that as we go through through this, because there are certain examples of that. So this is kind of just an example of what you would see. I actually meant to have a parks rather than stormwater here. So, this is kind of what we're going to go through tonight, just looking at the fiscal year ending 2022 projects. So just that's kind of a quick overview. I can see most of you on my screen, but I have to look over here. So if I'm pretending like I'm looking away, so I'm just looking at a different screen so I can actually see you. I guess I do a better job of looking at my audience than sometimes I think. So we'll start with streets, just jumping right in. So kind of this is just an outline of the city of Independence, and I'm going to kind of walk through this, and as I present them, we'll kind of go back and forth so you can kind of see where some of these projects are located. We tried to provide some pictures so you can kind of understand exactly what projects we're talking about. So these are streets or transportation projects. As I mentioned, once we get the transportation system plan done, we'll have a much more robust list of projects to accomplish. But here are the projects that we're proposing for the next fiscal year. So the first is F Street bridge replacement. As you can see, that is a project that is a high dollar amount, but as most of you probably know, or will be happy to know, most of that project is being funded by a grant from Oregon Department of Transportation. We do have matching funds for that project, but the most of the project is actually going to be paid by ODOT. So this is a project that staff from a number of years ago went after really hard and were successful in getting, and will be a huge benefit to a lot of the things we're seeing in the TSP and some of the things that Councilor Roden and others have brought up about trying to create other connections to help with the intersections that we have at Main Street. So F Street Bridge, just kind of jumping to that project, is it's number one, so it'll be close to that number one on my screen there. And there kind of pulls it up. This is an old aerial, but it kind of shows the area. So this is really Inspiration Garden right here in this area. This is the old lumber plant, and this is Ash Creek that runs in between the two. You can see F Street Bridge right here in this location, and the project is really to essentially replace that bridge. Kind of zoom in at there a little bit more and just kind of let you see the kind of the extents of what the project is going to be. You can see here is the bridge proper and the rails between it. But there's also needs to be asphalt that goes back and forth in transition areas on either side. There's sidewalks on both sides of the bridge, as well as bike and access as well. So a major improvement to this area. There's some stormwater facilities over here as well, but you can see, I'll just kind of toggle back and forth, kind of where that bridge sits relative to where the old bridge site is. Currently, they're in design on this project, and they are expecting to bid it June, July of this year. So definitely we'll be ready to do that. We'll also be taking a look at the bidding environment, making sure that that is the smart thing to do. But definitely making progress on this project. It's actually closer to $2 million project, but $300,000 of that was spent this last year for design services. Just kind of a couple of pictures. Here's a picture looking east. Weight limit of 7 tons. We're worried about Independence Bridge being 25. I think this is 7. This bridge is really in poor shape. Obviously, there's no pedestrian connections there. And if you take a look from underneath, you can see it's a timber bridge that just, quite frankly, needs to be replaced. I'll note in the background here, you'll see this is actually a water line. We'll talk about that water line here. I mentioned at the beginning that sometimes these projects have multiple funding sources. This is one of those projects that does. Not only is it getting money from ODOT, the city has matching funds for part of the street, as well as we're going to use some water and storm monies as well in order to provide our matching funds for this project. Let's see. So jumping back out, Main Street Reconstruction project. So this is another transportation project, and it's about $525,000 for the street stuff. Roadways have gotten very, very, very expensive to operate and maintain. And one of the things that we'll be coming back to council to talk about is maintenance and operations of our roadways in the future. But we're using the monies that we have collected through the state gas tax as well as other funding sources to get this project done. This project has a tremendous amount of volume on it. So that's why it gets rated really high in the construction paving index calculations that we do. And so it's something that we have pretty much been designing for a while. I'll just jump to it here. So it's project 3A, which you can see there, and its location is really between F Street and the Independence Bridge, that section of pavement there. And so that entire section of pavement will be ground up and overlaid. Ken's here, and Ken can comment a little bit more if he wants, but certainly this is a project that we're looking at doing. I'll show you a couple of pictures here just real quick. This is looking from F Street south, and you can see the transition from the pavement that was done with the prior project and the pavement and the condition that it's kind of in that area right now. There's another picture. So Ken, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to say also that along that roadway, I mean, we've got many, many potholes. I'm sure some of you are aware, but we try to take care of them, but it's just never ending. Along with the pavement, we plan on doing some curb stuff and some new street entrances that really need some attention. And along with that, there'll be some storm work as well.
All right, so that's that next project. Ken, do you want to talk about the sweeper? I'll let you lead out and then I'll just follow. So,
okay. I don't know how many of you are aware, but we've got an older sweeper. I want to say it's about a 2006. They're very expensive, but we are getting to the point of maintenance that it's time to do a purchase of a sweeper. We have tried to band-aid it many times, depending on the year and what's wrong with it. I believe 2 years ago, we spent $50,000 in maintenance, but we weren't quite there for a purchase. So we decided to hold off for another year after doing some major repairs, and we did. Those repair numbers have gone down, but there's a breaking point of when you need to do a replacement, and it is definitely time. The sweeper that we are looking at is a newer style sweeper with one engine versus a two engine that we have. And it's a very, very expensive piece of machinery, but we are sweeping 2 days a week, Monday and Thursdays, and that might eventually go to 3 days a week with the growth that we're seeing. And then this is also split through another account, which will come up here in a little bit. So that funding is half funding out of streets.
yeah, so Ken very much wants to replace this logo with the City of Independence logo. We've looked at options to lease, and those don't make any sense. Essentially, you end up paying a lot more to lease a sweeper or come up with other solutions. So I know our finance director has looked at this carefully along with Public Works, and we believe that purchasing our own sweeper that's actually going to do the job that we need is a much better way of going about it, doing it. They are very expensive, surprisingly. That money that you saw there is only half of the sweeper. The remainder of the monies is in the storm fund. So when we get to that, you'll see that allocation there as well. All right, so jumping back, we're on item number 7. This is the Gun Club and Hoffman safety improvements. And these are just the matching funds. So you see the project here is just $100,000, but the overall project is much higher than that. That's just the money that the City of Independence needs to allocate to that project. You'll notice at F Street Bridge, again, we're not paying $1.7 million for it, but the difference is this is a reimbursable. So we have to show the money going out of our account, and then there will be a corresponding grant funding line coming in for that on the Hoffman, or for the Gun Club and Hoffman project. The money's going through the county, so really we only have money going out for our matching funds related to that project. I'll show you a few images here, but I think Ken can probably explain this project better than I can. So go ahead, Ken.
So this is a joint project with Polk County, Monmouth, and the City of Independence. And it's more so for safe routes to school and whatnot. I know that Polk County was originally trying to get a traffic light there. That was shot down, so that's not happening. But we look at doing where it's a much safer process, especially along the west side of Gun Club and then also the south side of Hoffman Road. So it'll be a much safer pedestrian route. It'll be curb and gutter and storm work, that type of thing, realigning the crosswalk and just making it a much safer route.
Yeah, so sorry I didn't label this, but this is Hoffman Road here. This is Gun Club coming south off of Hoffman, and then you see 16th over here where the schools are. So,
Councilor Core, I think you're trying to wave in.
Yeah, is it okay to ask questions?
Of course.
I know the safe routes to school issue has been an ongoing one, trying to get the grant money. Now that there's an apartment complex going in on Hoffman Road up the street in Monmouth, I think that's going to make that stoplight issue even more important. Is there any effort to look at that going forward?
You know, we talked about that with the county just the other day, and you know they're still pretty frustrated that the signal got pulled out, and so I don't know that we have an official plan of attack yet, but certainly it's something that we're continuing to look at. We were told when that wasn't supported in the safe routes to school that it scored well, and we should come back to the same program for that. So chances are that we'll be looking either to that same pot of money or something else to get that done.
One more question, and maybe Ken can answer this. Going back to the sweeper, on the truck, it said echo infused. I can't find any definition of echo infused. Do you know what that means?
I don't, but I'll get back. I apologize.
No, it's cool. Thank you.
So, and here's just a couple of pictures. That's the intersection of Gun Club and Hoffman. You can see things aren't great there. You've got the ditch and there is a path there, but not the best path in the world. And then just here's another picture coming down Gun Club. You can see there's nothing over here on the west side, as Ken mentioned, except for a ditch.
Tom, can you go back to that previous picture? So what we're looking for is something like this east side of Hoffman, where it's much more separation, curb, all that stuff, sidewalk, you know, and it'll be lifted and whatnot. So it'll definitely be a lot safer.
I have a question on that. Is Pacific Power going to pay for any of the damaged paths that they created on that? I believe it's Pacific Power who runs that power station right there. Is that right? Or is that Monmouth Power?
It's Bonneville and Pacific Power.
Yeah. So when they were putting their heavy machinery in there, they went and drove across the path and broke a lot of the sidewalks. I walk that path almost daily. Are they going to be responsible for any of those fees?
That will all get torn out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a county's project, so we'd have to ask them that. But since it is, I think what Ken's trying to say is it's all getting removed and replaced, and all this is getting reconfigured anyway. So probably wouldn't, they probably won't be going back to ask Pacific Power for that. So.
Okay.
All right, so moving on, that was project number 7. So project number 8, I don't have any visuals for this. We've talked about this a lot during the capital improvement plan, as well as a number of other things. $50,000 obviously is not the project cost. The project cost is probably closer to $9 or $10 million. But we need to get started somewhere. And so this money would really be to start looking at some refinements of alignments and starting to look at some of the wetland issues we have out there, trying to kind of determine where we might want to be crossing Ash Creek. Certainly we're getting a good amount of information out of the transportation system plan, which is assisting in that, but we need to continue to move this forward. It's very clear that that's a key project that needs to get moved forward, and we need to keep moving it forward. So we're going to allocate monies to get some consultant fees to help us to understand what we need to do in order to get that done. We still have railroad issues and a number of things. So we'll really be using that money just for consultants to figure out how we can keep that project moving forward as fast as we possibly can. You'll probably see as we finish the capital or the transportation system plan and we get into doing what is the next item, number 9, street SDC and fee updates. We'll really be looking very carefully at how we're going to pay for these projects. And so that isn't just the Southern Arterial, it's actually all of the projects that will come out of the transportation system plan. And so we need to update our system development charge methodology. We need to make sure that we're being fair to the development community, but also that the development community, at least we know what impact the development community is having to present to council to decide what they want to do ultimately with system development charges. But we have a lot of work to do there. These are very detailed financial analysis. They get into very deep into the weeds and make sure that we have the monies that we need in order to do these projects over the long term. A lot of this also is fee updates. I mentioned at the beginning that we have issues with our streets. We have some issues with our sidewalks, and we have other things. And so we also need to look at potential fee updates or other ways to fund our transportation system and make sure that we're looking to the long term and make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we have failing infrastructure and extraordinarily high costs. We would rather spread that over time and make sure that we are being fair throughout the entire project. So that's project number 9 is $75,000. Typically, just a regular SDC methodology would be about 50, but given the complexities that we have with everything, we bumped that up to 75,000 to make sure that we have the money to cover those particular projects. So.
Can I jump in with a quick question, likely for Ken? You mentioned, and we're going to go way back to the sweeper. I apologize.
Okay.
So it was mentioned, I believe, that our current sweeper is a 2006.
Mhm.
So are we looking at a likely lifespan of about 15 years?
Yeah, and is Glory in on this meeting, Tom?
She's available, I believe, if we want to pull her in.
So I believe so what we try to do is we try to cycle all of the bigger equipment because it's so expensive. And, a couple of years back, we got the vac trailer and the backhoe. And so we try to get those where we're either doing every 5 years, especially if we're doing leases and whatnot, where we buy them out. So that way we don't come and hit so heavy on big equipment because they're all so expensive. And I believe we just have one more year on that. And that's what we're trying to hold out for, is to keep that rotation going. But it's to the point where we need to move forward with the sweeper purchase. And there is, and I apologize, Councilor Core, for not having more ready information. Cliff is the lead street sweeper operator. And if you look it's under Elgin is what it's under, and it's actually under street sweeper environment. And basically it's more eco-friendly in regards to contaminants and stuff, where they have less stuff that gets out in the air, less water to go on the drains, and it cycles better so that we're not leaving more stuff for the catch basins and whatnot. Because in a little bit, when we talk about storm, we'll be talking about Tmdl, which is pollutants going, possibly going to the river and that sort of thing. And I can take you a link to this too, so if you guys would like that.
Thank you.
Pardon me?
No, I'm looking it up right now. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you bet.
So Ken, I believe our current sweeper broke down a couple of years ago, and to repair these sweepers is really, really expensive. Do you remember what the bill was on that?
It was roughly 50,000 throughout that year. And there were some pretty big fixes, because if you have to fix the broom head and stuff, we have to take it up to Portland and have them repair it. These aren't repairs that, you know, if we had an oil change or a start or something like that, you know, we'll do something like that. But when it's really specific to the sweeper, we need to take it up to the representative, have them work on it. And that was a very significant year. So that's what's held us off for a couple of years in having lower repairs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that the funds were coming from a couple of different places. So I'm guessing this number here is not the total price tag on this item.
No, we'll show it in the storm fund when we get there as well. So
Okay.
the total price is $290. It's then we're
Okay,
taking,
and that's what I wrote down as I was kind of figuring the annual expense on one of these. Yeah.
they're not cheap, but
No,
they do a lot of work for us.
absolutely.
Not only cleaning the streets, but also dealing with the leaves and
Right.
other things. And every city has the same issue. And every city, you know, really struggles with the high cost of them. But what we're concerned about, what we've been concerned about, is we had that $50,000 repair bill, and we know we're on limited time that we have with the existing sweeper. So how long is it till we have a $90,000 repair bill? I know we had a $90,000 repair bill in Sherwood on our sweeper a number of years ago, and they're just really expensive.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to move on from transportation. So does anybody else have any more questions? All right. So we'll move to the water system now. So water system, again, another map of Independence, and we'll just kind of move around and try to show you where these projects are. Someday we'll all get in a van and drive around and see all the infrastructure and have some fun. I know Public Works really enjoys doing that, and we just haven't been able to get everybody out here, especially the new counselors. I know some of you have already seen this multiple times, but definitely have a lot of infrastructure in the city which serves the residents, and we want to make sure that people know about it. But just starting, project 2A is the Main Street water line. And really, you know, whenever we do a road project, we look for projects that we can improve other utilities, because we just don't want to go back digging it up after we put the pavement down. So Ken, you want to talk about the water line project here?
Sure. It's the same area as the street project from F to I Street, the bridge there. And we've got two water lines. So we've got redundant mains there. The one currently that is serving all the water services to residences there is a 6-inch AC line, which our AC lines here in town are actually not bad. We check the cores on anytime we work on those mains or services, and we don't have a really bad pH problem, so we don't have asbestos issues. However, we have another main line in there, a 10-inch line that used to go to a reservoir. And so we're going to move all of this, take out all of the old services on the main, which some of them could possibly be old lead services, and it's copper, which tends to leak quite a bit here in town. And then we'll go to poly services, and we'll transfer those to the PVC pipe. And then we will abandon the AC line. There's also down on I Street, there's two redundant lines. There is 2-inch PVC and then also another AC line. So we're going to replace that. We'll also be replacing some fire hydrants along there that are older or undersized. And that will also give us better flow off that 10-inch. And then later on in future years, we would continue out south the Corvallis Road section. We'll carry on that project because that's old steel pipe and it's only 4-inch. That'll help the flow there later. And it's also like a cheese grater. We're constantly going out there doing repairs on it. So that's coming up to extend that project.
All right, so $175,000 for that water line that Ken was talking about. Project number 5 is the Willamette Wellfield Joint Pilot Test with Monmouth. We have $35,000 programmed for that. This project has been under development for a long period of time. Here, I'll jump back and so you can kind of see where it is. This is south of the bridge, kind of behind these homes off of Corvallis Road, and kind of in the old railroad alignment down there. And there were 3 wellheads drilled a long time ago, I think back in 2008, or maybe even before that. And those kind of sat there for a long period of time. And we've been working on a joint project with Monmouth to figure out what the best way to utilize those wells are in the long run. We're trying to figure out what treatment options are the best currently. They're looking at filters for that and trying to figure out just exactly what production we can get out of those wells and rehabilitate those. So that's a joint project. We don't have a whole lot of money allocated for it. A lot of the money was invested a long time ago, but we know that there are some issues in the wells in the bottom of one of them, and one of them just has never been a very good producer. So just lots more to figure out there, and we'll spend the next year kind of working with Monmouth on trying to figure out how to best utilize those wells in that particular location. Item number 6 is the Polkwell Field, and that is a new well that's north of town. So jumping all the way up to the sports park there in this area. And this well is located right over in this area. And this well is under development. I think you saw, maybe I should have stayed there a little bit longer, but $490,000 in order to finish developing this well. There's some design work and the development that needs to happen, and connections, power, all sorts of things, getting it out of the floodplain. But this well is turned out to be really highly productive and gives us some really good water. And we're hopeful that this well will, sorry, I'll come back to that, will give us enough additional water for 5 to 10 years. So it's money well spent. As we have growth going on and other things, we need to continue to expand our water supply. And this well right here should do that. So here's a picture of the wellhead pointed back towards the apartments, and is something that we're going to get great value for, as that gives us a fairly good intermediate solution while we figure out the Southwell field or other options to provide water for the city. So this project has been under development for kind of the last couple of years with test wells and other things, and we've had some great partners, and so far that's gone well. I threw this picture in, sorry about that, because I was just doing it at the last minute. But I wanted to show you those Leland cypresses that I was talking about earlier out there at the sports park. So you can kind of see them. They just got planted here this last week. But there's some of them for you to see.
Tom, is there if I say something on that?
Of course.
So on those Lelandii cypress, so those were planted 9 foot on center, and within 2 to 3 years, those could be touching. So they expand very well as long as they have adequate water, which the farmer has adequate water out there. So.
All right, so moving forward, item number 7 is a master plan update. We haven't done the water master plan for a while. So I mentioned we were doing the sewer this year. Our plan next year is to do the water and the storm. And like I mentioned, one of the reasons I'm not doing all the out years is because we're getting these new master plans in place, and we can talk about all the projects that are out there, but they're probably going to change and move around in priority as we have professionals come in and study these. Typically, our master plan updates come from our system development charges money, so that's not coming from the fees that most people are paying from, just so you know. Item number 13 is a water quality pilot study and implementation. This is a small project that wouldn't have been in the master plan because it's kind of come up over the last few years. As Ken mentioned, we've been having some issues with our copper pipes. We haven't had any, issues with copper or anything, but we've definitely seen some deterioration of the pipes quicker than we would like. And we're fairly certain that's due to pH issues. And so we have a consultant that we brought on board to do some studying of that. The next year would probably be implementing solutions to that to balance the pH of the system out. Not an extremely expensive project, but it is an important one. And so we've added it to the CIP just to make sure that we continue to track it. Water treatment facility control system, we have $10,000 in here, and probably the next year we'll probably have a lot more. I think we have 50,000 programmed for that particular project next year. This is really our SCADA system. Every city, big and small these days, has a SCADA system because we can't have operators on 24/7. We need to be able to control things remotely. We need to be able to turn pumps off and on. We need to know when things go wrong, and there's alarms on systems. And so those control systems are very important. Independence was an earlier adopter of getting the SCADA systems in, but our SCADA system is way out of date and is becoming a liability. So we're going to be studying that on the water side this year, and then working on a program to update that system here in the near future. And that's a project that we probably should have started a number of years ago. We just didn't have the bandwidth to get to it. Item number 15 is public works facility improvements. So our public works facility is way too small for the community that we have. And it is very old. I don't know how many people have you been over there, because it's so cramped that there's hardly room for our employees. We had extreme issues during COVID. We had to dislocate employees from that area multiple times just because we couldn't keep them 6 feet apart. We couldn't keep them safe in that facility. And so what we've been doing over the last few years, and what we're continuing to plan to do, is to put money away for the purchase of property and ultimately a new facility there. We're not sure if we'll be able to buy a facility that's already done that can be retrofitted for public works use, or whether we'll build something new. But unless we have some monies in order to purchase a property or do something, we're always just going to sit here talking about it, and we're going to end up not being able to do the things that we need to do. So this is really talking about improvements, and we might do some improvements over there. One thing we're talking about is maybe getting a modular trailer in for the short run, so that we can actually make sure that we have adequate space for our workers. But you should also go over there and visit it someday. I think you'd be surprised. It's in pretty poor shape. So we're just trying to put money away for that. And then $10,000. I won't go to it again because you've seen it already a couple times. But it's the water line. Actually, I will go to it. So the water line for the F Street Bridge. Sorry, I'm jumping around really quick here. I apologize. We saw this before. This is the F Street Bridge project. And I've showed you that water line underneath, but I was able to get another picture of that today. So this is the water line that needs to get replaced. It's adjacent to the bridge, it's lower to the bridge. And so obviously, if you have water that rises up to it, there's a significant risk. So that pipe will get tied to the bridge, as well as put in a location to make it much more sound in the future. So sorry, I'm standing in Inspiration Garden here, looking kind of northwest, I guess, at the bridge there, just for your relocation. Sorry, I've done these slides a number of times, so if I'm jumping around too quick, just let me know.
You're doing great.
All right, so Storm. Actually, before I move on to storm, were there any other questions on water? All right, so storm is a fund that doesn't really have much money in it. That's pretty true for every city, and so we have been saving up for a while in this fund, so we can do some stuff. You probably saw it there when I was looking at the water, but the F Street Bridge replacement project, as I mentioned, had multiple sources. There's a large pipe that comes out here. That's actually not what needs to be improved on the project, but because we're adding asphalt and we're adding surface area, we need to provide water quality for that, as well as we have some storm connections along the F Street Bridge that need to get tied in and worked out. So that is the storm contribution to that project. Storm system annual operations and maintenance. Ken, you want to talk about what you guys do there on the storm system?
Sure. So with this money, there's several different things we can actually use it for. Sometimes it could be going back and doing some ditch cleaning on some of our bigger swales that we have throughout town, but more so this money is used in areas that we don't have any storm implemented. When we started charging the storm fee, we literally got phone calls at least once a week saying, hey, I want a catch basin out front of my house because I'm paying this fee. So we started looking at all the different areas throughout town that don't have storm or that need storm updating. And then we would go in and we'd put a line in or upgrade the line or a broken line, and we'd use that for that type. So right now this year, we have a few different neighborhoods where we're going to go in and do maybe a half block of storm improvements, which will help quite a few houses, and try to spread that around town. So we're not just doing it in one location.
Stormwater master plan, item number 6. Again, just another master plan to make sure that we are keeping up to date on what we need to be doing around the city. They'll be looking very carefully at any deficiencies in the existing system. Stormwater master plans tend to be less about development than they are about existing issues in your system, whether they be just capacity issues or water quality issues, but also, there's some environmental issues that you need to be really looking at when you're looking at stormwater issues. And Ken talked about TMDL, and he'll talk about it here again in a minute, but we really need to make sure that we're meeting the state and federal requirements. And so it's a different kind of master plan, but it also is very important that we look to do that. Item number 8, it's back. There it is again. So sweeper, big expensive project, but we think it's well worth getting done. And then finally, Ken is going to talk about the water quality improvements in the Tmdl program here. So for item number 9.
Okay, so in regards to this, and it says MS4. So basically, when a city becomes the population of 10,000 or more, there begin to be more rules set for stormwater, and just so many more rules, so many more things to implement. We've already been working on a TMDL program, and that stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. And basically, I'm going to read this to you just so you have an idea of what it talks about. A TMDL is a calculation of the maximum amount of pollutant that a water body can accept and still meet the state's water quality standards for public health and healthy ecosystems. With that being said, we're already doing this program in many different ways, working with Lucky Mute Watershed. They'll do some rehabilitation along streams and whatnot, where we put little emblems on our stormwater catch basins so that people don't dump oil in them, and we get these pollutants. We do the dog waste stations. That even helps, believe it or not. Those are all things that tie into this TMDL. When we do hit 10,000, we're going to have training on it. We're going to have to implement more things. And then we're going to have to be looking at things like more setback requirements for unnamed and named tributaries along Ash Creek, that sort of thing. And even like that sweeper, it's more so for, yes, we want to sweep the streets, make them look nice, because it does a great job of that. But also in talking about this, Councilor Core, looking back at the notes on the eco infusion, that's going to help by having less air pollutants and less water being used that don't go in the catch basins, because they're going to start looking at us and seeing what we're doing to stop those pollutants going to those rivers. And it's due to, the environment, whether it's fish or temperature or whatever. And that's also, the TMDL is through DEQ, and that's actually part of our permit that's going to be coming up and talking. We have mercury decisions that we have to talk about, and in regards to our wastewater discharge permit. So there's going to be, with our size of our city growing so rapidly, we're going to be spending more money probably in that water quality section of it.
Yeah, and council probably remembers I sent you a letter, I think a couple weeks ago from I think it came from Oregon DEQ, but it really was based on the EPA's recommendation for mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And this money would go to making sure that we have that plan in place next year, which we're required to do to make sure that we're meeting those total maximum daily load requirements. Those are hard to measure. You can measure them coming out of your sewer treatment plant really easily, but these non-point sources that might be coming into some catch basin that's ending up in Ash Creek are really hard to track. And so, we have to do the best job that we can in order to make sure that we're meeting those requirements. And this money would go to helping us get not only that mercury in place, but all the other pieces that we need to as well.
And especially because we're a river city, and that's our big thing here. So.
All right, questions on stormwater before we move on? All righty. Sanitary sewer, everybody's favorite topic. All right, I don't have a whole lot of projects here that we're going to point out. You probably know that we spent a tremendous amount of effort on our sanitary sewer program here over the last couple of years. We have completely remodeled and improved the Riverview pump station. You probably all saw that project going on, but that was a very large project that made significant improvements to an aging infrastructure that was a real liability. There were the wet well, which stores the sewage in there, was not big enough. The pipes going out of it weren't big enough. The pumps weren't up to date. Generator wasn't good. And so that was a big maintenance project that happened over the last year. And the other really big project that we've been working on is the recycled water use facility project. And that is the project that allows us to be able to contain all of the sewage in the lagoon through the summer months. During the summer months, we are not allowed to release anything from the lagoon, any effluent from the lagoon to the river. And so we basically have to store all that water for many months because, like Ken said, we're a river city. Not only do we care about the environment, but we're also required by the state to make sure that we aren't doing anything that would increase the temperature in the river, which can kill fish or release any type of material that would prevent them from getting oxygen. So that has been a big project. Along with that project, we also updated the Williams pump station. That's a much smaller pump station, the Riverview pump station. But those were very, very large projects. Recycled water use facility project basically allows us to, rather than making more lagoons, allows us to take the cleaned effluent from the treatment of that and put it on farmers' fields, who then can get a better crop for that, especially those that are doing grass. They need water late in the year. especially July and August. And so it's a win-win for both the city and the farmer. So we can't do that. We were having significant issues with DEQ over that, and because we weren't able to contain all the water in our lagoons due to just the amount of demand that we had. And so we had a number of years where we were releasing to Willamette before October 1st, which is not allowed under our permit with the state. So that should solve that problem. But since we've done so much the last year, our project list for this year is fairly small. I mentioned to you that we were going to be looking at the water treatment facility control system. We're also updating the wastewater treatment facility control system. We were able to do some major portions of that with both the Riverview pump station as well as recycled water use and the William Street. So we've gotten the in pieces of that done, but we still also need to update the control systems in the offices. And so that money is allocated to basically SCADA in order to get that up and running properly. Line item number 7 is just our annual operations and maintenance. It's pretty expensive on the wastewater side or the sewer side. So Ken, do you want to kind of talk about what that entails?
Sure. So some of the things that we need to do in our wastewater permit, one of them is a yearly I&I report, which is infiltration inflow of, could be rainwater, stormwater, could be leaks in laterals from homes. But we still have our own main lines that are getting older, that were concrete, where the joints are separated, or there's cracks or reverse grade, and they get plugged. This money will allow us to go in, and if we've got a shallow enough place and we can excavate the site and dig the pipe in, it's cheaper. And then in some areas where it's deeper, more cost efficient, we'll go in and basically put kind of like a sock liner inside of the pipe, or pipe burst it to where they put a new pipe inside the old pipe. So what we can use this money for is a couple, 2, 3, 4 blocks, depending on how deep it is and what we need to do, which way we need to go. That's the money that we work toward. In addition to that, we can do manhole repairs for I&I. And then at the end of the year, we could tell DEQ in our report, hey, look, we've done this much money. We've worked on our I&I, we're trying. And I&I is a problem that every city has, and you can't ever get rid of it, but you really need the numbers to go down, and DEQ wants your numbers to go down. And the other thing that this helps in doing these types of maintenance things, like the liners and whatnot, with helping that I&I, getting less of it, you're putting less in your lagoons for your storage. And our storage is already over capacity, basically. That's why we're doing the spray effluent project. So with that being said, if we cut back on I&I, that helps us a little bit in our lagoon containment. And like I said, you'll never get it, but you could be at 700,000-800,000 gallons a day of influent at our sewer lagoons. And in the winter, on rainy season stuff, we could be at 3 million. So that kind of tells you, what happens with I&I. And it's a constant battle. It really is.
It is, and it's kind of like running around, putting your finger in little holes in pipes all over the place. Some places will spend millions of dollars trying to control their I&I, and they have limited success. You're better off to try to find the point sources where you're having it, whether it's a bad manhole or a line or a cross connect where you've got a storm line connected into your sanitary line. And deal with it that way. But it is fairly expensive and time consuming. So that's why you see a fair amount of money going into that. We also have just lines that break in services and all sorts of other stuff that happens throughout the year as well. Item number 12 is updating the SDC rate and fees. I've kind of talked about this before, but this is the tag on project to your master plan. You do your master plan first, you identify all the projects, and then you go back and figure out how you fairly distribute that cost for the growth related projects through your system development charges, and then what you need to pay in fees to do that. Last time we did that was back in 2017. We've referred to that report a number of times. that was done by Steve Donovan. He did an excellent job on both our water and wastewater. But you really need to redo those every 5 years because it's very important that you have those right, because ultimately, you know, you don't want to have large increases that we come back to council and say, hey, we need you to raise people's rates. Last time I checked, that's not a popular thing for counselors to be talking about. So we try to really stay in front of these things, and we do these projects so that doesn't happen. So it's money well spent. Treatment plant facilities plan. I'm going to actually jump there to that location just real quick. That's project number 16, and it's kind of in the north end of town, or the middle of town actually. But this is really our lagoons. So, you know, in all their glory, this is where everything ends up. You'll probably notice that it's certainly not at the lowest location in Independence. And that's because everything in Independence ends up in some sort of pump station that actually pumps it up to the lagoon so it can be treated. It's the same in Monmouth. We're a river city. We're right on the river. Everything's super flat here. So you can't just have everything work by gravity. So not only do we have a lot of pump systems that we have to deal with, but we also have this 4-bay lagoon system that we are using. Earlier, we mentioned that we worked on a really large project for flows that are over capacity, and so that we were releasing early in the year to the Willamette River. But we're also having issues with trying to treat the amount of material that is getting to our facility. So we are struggling, and not surprisingly so, according to our consultants, to keep inside our permit levels for removal of what's called biological oxygen demand. And it's basically all the stuff that's in our sewage water that you need to take out before you release it to the river and the effluent and treat it. That's primarily through a bacteriological process. It just breaks that down. But you need to have it in there for a certain amount of time for that to work. And so really your only options are to go bigger with your facility plan, or to upgrade it in order to make it work more efficiently. And so I think we already know what the answer is, but we need to do some studies and figure that out. But we're probably looking at some sort of a system where we are going to put in aeration, which is just basically putting water into the lagoons, or air, air, it has plenty of water. Putting air into it, so which makes the bacteria more active and breaks things down quicker, so that basically you don't have to expand your facility. I mean, really, once you get to the point where you're behind the curve, your only choices are it's a bigger lagoons, or build a full-on sewage treatment plant. But a sewage treatment plant is probably $20+ million. And so obviously we're going to do everything that we can to keep our existing facilities working for the long run. And that's what we need to study to make sure that we aren't continuing to trip up against the DEQ limits that are in our permit, which aren't going to get any easier. So that is what that $75,000 is to come up with that facility plan to figure out how we can add air and get that plant running more efficiently. We also, this is an item that we primarily identified during the winter storms, is we don't have enough generators for our sewer lift stations. And so what we do is we tow a generator from lift station to lift station, lift station, lift station, to make sure that they're not getting full and overflowing. So we're going to start working on a program to put permanent generators in at those sites, because that was a real problem when we were going on. And then item number 18 is a corollary item to the water. That is to make sure that we have adequate reserves in order to expand the public works facility and make some temporary improvements along the way. So that's wastewater. I see everybody's yawning. I guess everybody's not a civil engineer like me and just loves this stuff. I should say a recovering civil engineer.
I do have a question. if
Yes,
you
go
don't
ahead.
mind.
No.
You mentioned the bill that you mentioned, legislative bill. How would that really upset the way we collect SDCs? Would it compromise some of the money that we have in this capital improvement plan that is coming in from SDCs to fund things?
You know, traditionally we've seen in the past, the bills that come through would have really significant financial impacts. This particular bill would probably have some impacts, but the problem is they're trying to change the timing of when you collect system development charges. From right now, we collect those at the building occupancy, or not occupancy. We collect it when somebody pulls a building permit. And that's a perfect time for us to collect it, because if we actually need to go out and make an improvement, then we have the money to go out and do that. And, you know, we're kind of challenged because we have to make the improvement quicker than they could build a house, if you want it online by the time that the house is in place. It's also really important for the city because we already have those tracking processes in place. It's critical that we do it in an organized way. And SDCs are really complicated, and I don't want to get into it too much, but there's two components to an SDC. One is for improvement projects that you're going to do. The other is for projects that you've already got done, and that growth is now using that capacity in the system. And so, you know, sometimes we'll have a loan out on a project and we need to get repaid. And if they drag that out until, in some cases they're proposing to drag that out until actually the closing day of the sale of the property on single family residential houses. Well, we're going to have to track that. We're going to have to figure that. Some are going to get missed. I mean, because the title company might, not see it. We don't really have an effective process to put a lien on the property at that point. It'll be extraordinarily costly, time consuming, and be completely out of sync with when we actually need to collect the monies in order to do these projects in an orderly manner.
Okay, I definitely get that. It would be like the city financing all of the projects that need to be done, and maybe you're not getting paid on time, if at all.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
I did have a question, and I don't know if this is for Tom or Ken. I've had several people ask me about if the Willamette River in our area is safe to swim in, safe for pets, and safe for fishing and eating the fish. Can you give me an answer to that?
Well, it depends on how good of a swimmer you are. Just kidding.
Wading,
Yeah. Well, you really need to be careful because the currents in that section of river can be dangerous. But as far as water quality, the Willamette River is really, really very clean river. And a lot of that is because of the efforts that we go to and other cities go to under what are called our MS4 permits, which are permits which were required. So when we release effluent out of our sewer treatment plant, that stuff is really clean, and it is really well treated. It's also, been treated with chlorine as well. So, the only time you'll see issues are when there's something goes wrong and you're releasing a lot of material that isn't as treated as you would like to be, and you'll see notices go up immediately from cities when that happens. Most of the time, this happens in large storm events where nobody's going to be swimming in the river anyway. I saw that in even just this winter in some cities where there was just a release of material from their sewer treatment plant, and they need to report that and make sure that it's safe for people. I'm going to pull you guys back over here so I can actually look at you. So does that answer your question? One
more, the fish.
The fish?
Can they eat the fish? I had somebody that actually threw away his fish because he had heard that it wasn't safe to eat fish from the river. So I was just curious.
Can I jump in, Tom?
Yeah, please do.
First, I want to go back in regards to the treatment. So when we do treat the water and we do chlorinate it, we also dechlorinate that as well. So it's not chlorinated water going out. That is dechlorinated. So in regards to fish, it's kind of depends on your type of fish. Like salmon aren't just living there, you know, year round and all that stuff. In regards to a lot of river fish, whether you're on the Bonneville or Willamette, it depends on what type of fish. If it's like sturgeon per se, because there are sturgeon on Willamette you can catch out here. There's some good spots at Buena Vista or on the Bonneville. Those are more bottom feeders. So those are types of things that you need to watch out for, some of the pollutants that they could get. So it just depends on when you're taking your fish. You want to watch out for the browner portions when you're filleting them and whatnot. But the best way to talk about it is to go on ODFW site, ask them, because they'll even talk about like certain types of fish. You don't want to eat too much of any, you know, of a certain type of fish. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because there could be more pollutants that they could possibly, if they're a bottom feeder per se. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does.
Okay. Does that help?
Thank you. Yeah, it does help.
Okay.
Great question, Counselor. Thanks for asking. All right. If there's no more wastewater questions, we will move to parks. So last item, we include parks in our capital improvement plan. You'll see a couple other things in there as well, just that are large items, but really these 5 topics are the main ones. So parks, we have going to the list. Sunset Park is the first on the list, and you saw that back in the original document that I showed you from last year. And if you remember right, there was $600,000 program for fiscal year ending 2022. Clearly, we don't have that much money laying around to work on parks. And so our plan is to do somewhat very similar to what we did at Mount Fur Park or Inspiration Garden. And that is just to kind of do a little bit a year. We did a fair amount last year in getting the grading done, the storm system in, and the seeding done out there, as well as the path. But there are definitely other things that we can do. And I think Sean was going to jump in here as well, because Sean kind of really manages a lot of our parks projects. So Sean, are you out there? Jason will bring him in. If not, I'll cover it the best I can. So item number 1 is Sunset Park.
Yeah, here I am. Sorry.
Okay, good. So Sunset Park, here I'll go back, is located, kind of in the south quadrant of our town. It's a very linear park that goes between Chestnut and Maple Street. And this was really just a grass field until recently. And so put in the path, did the grading here, put in some storm facilities. And Sean, what are we looking to do next?
So really, I think the next big thing is to put a playground in there, kind of ideally a playground with a little bit of hardscape for, picnic tables and benches, potentially a shelter. That'll be kind of the next and really kind of the primary, kind of improvement that remains there. I think we can definitely do some landscaping and some other, kind of benches and rest areas along the way. But really the big ticket item that's left would be that playground area.
So here's some pictures. That's from looking right here, looking this way. Second picture will be from right here, looking this way. And third picture is kind of up here, looking this way. So I'll just show you some pictures I took earlier today. And grass is still getting established out there, but certainly it's looking a lot better than it did even just last year. So this is kind of a park we're just gonna pick off. If we're not looking at a very extravagant play structure here, obviously at $50,000. But if we can't make that work, then we would probably move on to the next step of the project, which is landscaping and irrigation out there. So one way or the other, we'll just keep moving on with making that park better. So item number 4, independent sports field. This item actually came from the priority setting meeting that we had with council. It was clear that baseball fields and sports fields and other things are a priority to getting going. So we kind of talked to people, and we think that, you know, 40,000 probably at the most would get us some really good consultant services to go out and take a look at what are the possibilities, what type of fields could we put out there, and what would make sense. So this is at the sports park north of town. And so what we're really proposing to do is to say, okay, well, here's our existing soccer fields. What else can we do out here? What makes sense? What would baseball fields look like? What would more soccer fields look like? What can we do with this area in order to move to the next step, which would be actually constructing something. So that really came from what we heard from council at the priority setting meeting. So otherwise that wouldn't have been on the list. Just to be honest, we were probably a few years away from actually getting to that, but we moved that up based on what we heard from council. Let's see here. Riverview Park Master Plan Amphitheater, river frontage, engineering design, $20,000. So Sean, you kind of want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Riverview Park?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we've been investing pretty heavily up and down the riverfront with the park system there, and the amphitheater is kind of the keystone. But we did a new master plan for Riverview Park back in 2018, I think it was, to reimagine that kind of the east side of the Riverview Park, essentially kind of that whole parking drive aisle area, and where the playground is as well. Because really that parking area in particular was designed when, you know, and built when there was a boat ramp there. It was built for boat ramp park or boat trailer parking, and that's not necessary anymore with the relocation of the boat ramp. So the new design idea is to connect the trail from the southern portion down there in Independence Landing Park up to the northern, you know, kind of continuation of the Willamette River Trail up there, and really to try to do it in a way that doesn't force you to walk down the drive aisle or through the parking lot of the, you know, dodging vehicles. So it need to keep you kind of in the green space, separated from vehicles, create better proximity to the river, create high quality paddlers access, because a lot more people are using the park to access the river. And yeah, Tom's circling that area right now. You already discussed a couple times the grant that we've put in to design the paddlers access. That would be the vision for the location, is at the end of C Street where the old ferry used to be. But the idea would be to put paddlers access there, pull back the parking lot a little farther to the west, and fatten out the drive aisle a little bit to allow parking kind of along that way. The rough design actually retains essentially all of the parking that is already enabled there. So we wouldn't really be losing much, if anything, in the way of parking, but we'd be expanding green space, just creating better access to the river. So like Tom said, we already did actually try to put in one grant to fund construction of reconstruction of the parking area. Unfortunately, we're not successful in that, but if we can get the paddlers access going, you know, a lot of these grants, it's kind of a domino effect. Once you get funding for one thing, you can leverage that into more and then leverage that into more. So it's just kind of to see where we can get it going. But the funding, really, you need to kind of get your designs to a certain point to really demonstrate that you are kind of ready to do this, and that you're serious about doing it when you apply for the funding. So that's what's being plugged into the budget for this year.
Yeah, we're not 100% sure how we're going to spend that, but we know that, you know, when we have these grant opportunities, we either have to have some matching funds or we have to be able to demonstrate, you know, certain things. And so we're trying to just make sure that we can continue to be in the cycle for that. we understand that to make significant improvements out there, it's going to have to come from a grant, or for some other funding. And so we're just trying to prepare for that. So, and since we're in Riverview Park, I couldn't not show the 2 osprey that were there today. So, so there they are, sitting on top of their pole, looking very, very chill. All right, so sorry, didn't mean to go that way. So that was Riverview Park. Pool house improvements. We have had some preliminary designs done at the pool house. We're starting to say, okay, we need to probably polish those off and do a little bit more there. We're not certain, if this is the right amount or too much, but we certainly want to have the ability to figure out what we need to do there in the long term. That facility is well, if you've looked at the roof lately, I think that speaks volumes for it. I didn't get any pictures in here for that, but the facility is really struggling to stay standing at this point. So it's not that bad, but it certainly is. It needs some assistance. So Mount Fur Park Inspiration Garden. Ken can probably talk about this. As I mentioned, what we're trying to do on Sunset Park is just do a little bit each year. We've been doing the same thing at Mount Fur Park. We're getting to the point where we're lowering the amount. We have 40,000 allocated for this year. Next year, we only have 20,000 plugged into the budget. And the year after that, only 10,000, because we're getting to the end of what the city probably needs to do at that location. But Ken, do you want to kind of talk about what's on the schedule for this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Tom said, the path work we did over a few years, it's actually finished now. I don't know if any of you have been out there to see it, but it's great. They're doing a great job out there in the garden. It's actually beautiful out there. In regards to the next step for this coming budget year, we talked to them in some steering meetings and joined with them and asked them to come back with prioritizations of things that they want. And they wanted to do more than this, but I said, it's kind of a lot because we have to spread this out throughout the park since we don't have any revenue. So they came back with a list. And what the first thing is to get power to the park, which we're going to have to come off Beacon Road. We'll probably have to do a bore or trench in power. So there'll be a power contract with Pacific Power. Then we'll put in a panel for electrical. So they have electrical use at their greenhouses and whatnot. From there, they'd like to put in a light for security and then some cameras. And then in addition to that, the last portion of the money, they would like to spend some money to do irrigation design work. And they were talking about doing irrigation just on its own, but I suggest having the power first and go in that phase so you have power for your irrigation and whatnot, and to try to get the design done so that then they know how much money they need the following year or two to actually implement getting that process done. So those are the things they're going to be doing. We're going to be helping them get power to the site, a couple of power boxes, some surveillance cameras, a little bit of lighting, and then design for the irrigation system throughout the park.
And then finally, we have the skate park. Sean, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this one's been going, for a while. Honestly was making some pretty good traction, and then COVID set things back a bit. So we've kind of had a number in the budget for a while, just kind of hoping to be able to contribute to this. But optimistically, the group is getting some pretty good donations. They've gotten all the rebar donated. They just got a good commitment on the concrete at a very affordable price. So things are definitely coming together. It's a little unfortunate. They've got enough now that Monmouth is budgeting some money as well, and in a normal year would be able to put in for a pretty sizable grant that might actually be able to do this project. But that grant program has been kicked back a year, so we won't be able to apply until about this time next year. But it's on a good path, and I think it's definitely still worthy of a little kind of shared contribution here.
Yeah, this, one thing I should mention is just because it's in our capital improvement plan doesn't mean we're going to spend the money. We're really frugal on making sure that we're making smart decisions through the year. But one of the things is if you're using any development charge money, if it's not in your capital improvement plan, you can't spend the money on it. And so we tend to err on the caution of putting more in than less. And then you'll see that every year we never spend the amount of money in these funds. We're always being under the, we probably spend closer to the amount in the Parks Fund, but the other funds we're really careful on. And I say that because this $15,000 has been in all 3 fiscal year budgets since I've been here. We've never spent it. It just kind of just keeps bouncing down from year to year. So we try to do that as much as possible. So that's Parks. Any questions? I promised to give you a lot of information. Oh, we had one more part. I'm sorry, I meant to zoom in on the Inspiration Garden, so I didn't do that when we were talking about it. So this is the Inspiration Garden. It's right near where the S Street Bridge project starts, and I think you've all seen it, but here is some visuals from earlier today. So that's the garden there, the garden house. And if you need some inspiration, if you need to go out to Inspiration Garden, just take a look at this this guy here. He was out there just exercising because he needed to. And, we've been putting this path in over, I think, the last 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But, here's an opportunity for someone to get out and to, do what they need to do. And that guy was working a lot harder than I guarantee any of us did today. But making good use of the path and definitely enjoying the area. So sometimes inspiration comes in all sorts of ways out there. I was a little humbled by watching him to work out today. So
He's out there frequently.
Yeah. So that is Parks, and that
I have a
actually.
question on Parks.
Well, good.
I'm sorry, just a quick question. So do we have to wait until June or July to begin spending the money on the consultant for the sports park development?
Yeah, we would. But there's a process in order to get someone on board as well. That we're a government entity, so nothing happens super quickly because we have to follow all the state laws related to that. So we can't start spending the money, but we certainly can start working on getting them on board before that.
And can we start working on potential grants before then, or do we have to wait?
No, anytime. Anytime grants come available, we're working on those. And then the matching funds would catch up. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so that was probably a lot more than you're used to and maybe more than you wanted. I'll let you guys give me some feedback on capital improvement plans, but it's really important to us that you guys have a really good understanding of what the projects are, because ultimately, as we go the next step and really look at how you fund these projects, it's important that council has a good understanding of why we put system development charges in place the way that we do. Why do we put fees in place the way we do? Why do we spend so much time chasing grants and trying to find, outside monies to do these projects? And, there's a tremendous amount of great work that goes on in public works over the years and the work that they do. And I think people think a lot that it's just, them maintaining things and keeping things clean and being there for all the events that they do, but there's a lot more to that. There's a lot of projects that we don't talk about enough that are really critical to making sure that our residents have the systems they need for today and for the next 20 years and beyond. So I wanted to make sure that especially the new counselors had an opportunity to really get down into the weeds somewhat and take a look carefully at kind of what we've got coming up.
So council members, if you have additional comments to make, Tom, I'm sure he'll be glad to take those in the next several days, and reminding that we'll all see this as part of the budget when it comes in front of us, there'll be a whole capital improvement section where we get to read. Sound good? Thank you, Tom. It was a good presentation. Okay, so we're going to move forward, if that's okay with everybody. We're going to go to an executive session here. We're now going to end the work session. I now declare the work session over. We're going to go reconvening the regular session, and we're going to go to an executive session for the purpose of discussing real property negotiations. Okay? All right, I get to read my official piece of paper. The Independent City Council will now meet in executive session for the purpose of negotiating real property transactions. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-6602E, which allows the council to meet in executive session. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the sessions as previously announced. No decision will be made in executive session. This time, the council will recess for the duration of the executive session. Once the executive session is adjourned, we'll return to an open session. Any decisions from the executive session will be deliberated at that time. Without objection, we're going to go to the executive session.